All right. So these topics that I'm talking about in this series are how-tos, very specific topics within your yoga teacher training that support you as a trainer. So a lot of these have come from questions that I've had from trainers who have some of whom have already got their yoga teacher training started. Last week, I had a very specific question about the putting together an agenda, and so that is what we are talking about today. So the goal with these posts is to give you some ideas and, of course, give you some reasons as to why creating a daily agenda is very important in your yoga teacher training. So it really is a must-have in your yoga teacher training. Training for 6 to 8 hours at a time on a given day. A lot of trainings are run over weekends, but a lot are intensives that have even longer days. But if you're running a training over a weekend, over a series of weekends, you might have 6 to 8 hours on any of those days. And that's much different than teaching a 1-hour class. You've got much more material to cover. And so you are going to, don't learn the hard way. You may run out of things to do if you go in thinking you've got 8 hours of stuff to cover. I've got it, sort of planned in my head that I've got all of these topics to cover, and then it turns out that it only takes you and your group 4 hours to cover those particular materials. So you want to make sure that you have a plan, a daily agenda. I think for me also, it helps me be more present and really much more relaxed in training. When I have planned out my day, I can get an estimate of how many hours certain activities are going to take. And it'll vary for every group depending on how many people are in your training group. Some will be larger, some will be smaller, and your materials and your agenda will shift and change according to that. So my daily agenda starts off very simple. I structure it from kind of the top down. Every weekend that I meet, my trainings are on weekends. Every weekend that we meet as a group, I have some what I call base activities, things like yoga practice, journaling, posture lab. We cover a posture lab at every single training, and a yoga practice and journaling. There are in-class worksheets that I use. Those are part of the materials that I offer and that I use myself in my training. So there's in-class worksheets. So there's sort of a set group of activities and things that we do every weekend in training. Even those will vary in time length, depending on what else we have to cover in what I call the targeted activities. So there's sort of these base activities. We do them every time we meet. And then there are targeted activities, which are activities that vary every weekend or every module, every time you meet. So for instance, if you are covering meditation this weekend, you will spend more time doing that. I allot for much more time for meditation during the weekend that's on the agenda. So we don't just meditate. We talk about meditation. We talk about different types of meditation, moving meditations, guided meditations, seated meditations. So I'm going to be talking much more about meditation as well as extending the practice of it on those weekends that I'm covering meditation. On the weekend, for instance, that I cover pranayama, again, we're going to do the pranayama practices more so that weekend than we will in other weekends. Same with things like anatomy. So the weekend or module, and I say module because sometimes these overlap into other weekends, right? But the anatomy module or weekend that we have, we're doing some specific activities related to anatomy. The manual covers some more specifics on anatomy that we're not talking about every time. In my trainings, the posture labs do address anatomy, but during that weekend, we do some additional things. So those are the targeted activities for that weekend. I hope that makes sense. Having that agenda though will help you be able to plan your day and know, one, that you've got enough material to cover your weekend, but you also know what time you need to start those things. Every yoga teacher training, people want to ask questions and have conversations, and that's all wonderful. But you know that at 2 o'clock, for instance, you need to get started on the next topic. So if your 1 o'clock topic is running late, you know that you need to kind of reel that in for the time being so that you can get to your next topic and get moving. And that training agenda, having that written out, will help you plan that. So let's see. Other reasons to create a daily training agenda. So if your goal is to provide a valuable training to your students, provide what you promised, a daily agenda will help you make sure that you are getting everything accomplished. You are covering all the topics. If you plan to potentially hire some of the trainees that go through your yoga teacher training, that will also help. The daily agenda will also help you make sure that you're training them according to how you want them to teach at your studio. So if you plan on hiring them, you're going to want an agenda again to make sure you're covering everything and getting them trained appropriately. And last but certainly not least, and I'm sure the list is much longer, if you are interested in building your school's good reputation, then having an organized, well thought out training is going to be key to building that reputation and that, so that people know who you are, they know what they're going to get. All of these things feed into reasons why you would want a daily training agenda. So again, I'm going to go over the list of base activities: posture lab, practice, of course, journaling, worksheets, in-class worksheets that support what you're talking about. My classes also do read aloud. This, in my mind, helps prepare them for public speaking. So they're speaking in front of a class. Granted, it's very scripted, but it does help them sort of get used to hearing their voice projected out over the yoga room. And then there are the targeted module-specific activities. So all of those things are on the agenda every weekend. That is it for today. If you have got suggestions or questions that I can address in these future live streams, please post them here. You can message me. If it's a specific question, if you are already using my materials for your yoga teacher training and it's a question specific to those materials, please go ahead and shoot me an email. You have a direct line into communicating with me, so we can best answer those there. But if you've got some general questions about training, please post them and I will do a live stream on those questions.